Hello, and welcome back once again to our spooky season series, Bayou Witches. Better late than never, I say. Let's get back to business, shall we? Our second installment of our spooky season series, tonight we tell the story of Evangeline, the witch of Bayou Teche. Evangeline was enslaved on the Loveland plantation in St. Martinville, Louisiana. That plantation no longer stands, as it went to ruin many moons ago and was eventually torn down. Not much is known about Evangeline other than the fact that she was gifted. And many of the plantation owners in the area sought her advice over what crops to plant, what would do well, who to sell, and different business moves. She was valuable in more ways than one. But her enslaver, Mr. Loveland, well, let's just say he wanted her for more than just her gifts. He took whatever he wanted from Evangeline. And eventually, she fell pregnant with her first child. She knew it was going to be a girl. And when she gave birth, Mr. Loveland had instructed the enslaved woman who attended the birth to take the child right away. You see, mulatto children sold for a hefty price, and Mr. Loveland was all about profit. Evangeline was torn apart when her child was taken away from her. And she begged Mr. Loveland to let her keep her with her for at least the night. And he refused. What could she do? Evangeline was property. After all, she wasn't a person. Shortly thereafter, she became pregnant once again. And once again, she begged Mr. Loveland to please let her keep her child. He said no, that she was property and anything that came from her was his property as well. So when that child was born, he was taken away as well. And every time thereafter, the cycle repeated, and Evangeline found herself breaking down more and more each time, feeling more and more helpless each time. And with the sixth pregnancy, she once again begged Mr. Loveland to please let her keep her child. And he reiterated, "You are property, and anything that comes from you is my property as well." Evangeline knew that this would be his response, and she was prepared to act accordingly. And before he left her cabin that night, as she stood before him, heavily pregnant, rubbing her belly, she told him, "You have taken my children away from me, and I will make sure to take everything from you. Your entire bloodline will cease to exist, and the name Loveland will just be a memory." He smiled in her face and told her, "It doesn't matter, because I am the master and you are merely the slave." And he walked away. Later that night, Evangeline made her way to Bayou Teche, her hands delicately placed on her belly. And she began walking into the cold, dark waters of the bayou. And she hummed, mm, mm, mm. She hummed all the way until the water completely engulfed her and her child, embracing them both in the murky depths. The next morning, she was found floating at the water's edge. And she was buried in the slave cemetery on the grounds of Loveland Plantation. Her and her child, the one she was finally able to keep. The night of her burial, Mr. Loveland's father dropped head first into his dinner plate, thus beginning the curse Evangeline had placed upon the Loveland family. A few days later, at his funeral services, people reported hearing a humming. Mm-hmm. Coming from somewhere outside of the church. Shortly thereafter, Mr. Loveland's wife took sick with a mysterious illness. One day she lost consciousness and never woke up. After that, two of his daughters also fell ill and died. At their funeral, it was also reported that people heard a humming. Now, Mr. Loveland remembers the words Evangeline uttered to him on that very last night before she walked into the bayou. But there was no way he was going to believe that a slave had enough power to curse his entire bloodline. That was until a mysterious fire burned through most of his sugarcane crop. Then he had no choice but to pay attention. Next, his son was decapitated in a freak accident on the river. He completely lost his head. It was never found. So Mr. Loveland was forced to bury his headless son. And then his grandchildren fell ill and they died. His brother's two sons. And slowly but surely, Mr. Loveland was forced to watch his entire name go to ruin. All because he wouldn't let Evangeline keep her children. All because he viewed them as his property. He lost money. He lost friends. And when the war ended and the slaves were freed, there was no one around to take care of his property, to take care of him. And Mr. Loveland quickly descended into madness. And those that did come to check on him said that all he could talk about was seeing Evangeline floating around the house, listening to her humming through the night, so much so he couldn't sleep. And hearing babies cry in areas of the house that had long been abandoned. Finally, Mr. Loveland took sick. And on his deathbed, it is said that he tried to beg Evangeline for forgiveness. And all throughout the night of his death, he pleaded with her. I wonder if he ever got a response. he passed. According to his caretaker, he passed humming a song. Mm-hmm. 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 And that was the end of the Loveland bloodline. And eventually, the plantation rotted away and was torn down and completely forgotten about. But to this day, the people along Bayou Teche in St. Martinville swear they hear a woman humming and several children laughing. And I can't help but to think that Evangeline was finally reunited with all of her children in the afterlife. So the next time you find yourself in St. Martinville, Louisiana, be careful, tread carefully. And if you try to ask about the name Loveland, no one will speak of it out of fear, the curse of the witch of Bayou Teche. But please, pay her a visit, pay your respects, but don't go losing your head.